Good afternoon and welcome to my message of the day. I'm Warren, the rector here at St Columba's. Someone recently asked me about the difference between talking to myself and praying. They came from a non-believing point of view. They were thinking, I suspect, that I'm under some self-delusion when I pray, that in actual fact all I am doing is talking to myself. And I suspect that they think that prayer is only me talking, which is fundamentally wrong. But anyway, if intellectually, if we were to try and think about what we're doing when we're praying, how can we be praying, being present to God, the God who is not present to me in the same way that an object or another person might be present to me? How can we intellectually think of that? And the way forward is the doctrine of and the theology of transcendence, which basically says that God is not one object, not a bit of the creation itself, not in the universe, so to speak, but is completely other. And because God is completely other, God can be intimately present to me in a way that no other object in the universe can be present to me. Now, if you want to check that out, go to my blog, Classic Theology New, just Google it, and then do a search in the blog for transcendence, and you'll find a very helpful article from Philip Tolliday. You'll also find some writing from me, which will try to explain something of what I've just said. But anyway, let's go back to the experience itself of talking to yourself and praying. When I talk to myself, it's a very different experience than praying. Talking to myself is really about me. I am talking to myself. And I'm not talking to an imaginary person, I'm talking to myself. And it really is about me. Let's say I was angry about something, that's still about me. It's quite self-focused. Self-talk is appropriately named as self-talk. When I pray, which is not just me talking, that's important, that changes it straight away. Prayer is about listening, about silence, but most especially it is about presence, mutual presence. God and I, mutually present. And to understand that intellectually, you need to go back to that doctrine of transcendence that I mentioned. But as soon as I say that I'm praying, you see, as soon as I pray, it's already in some way broken through that self-focus of self-talk. I'm other-directed. Even if I bring before God me and whatever I'm upset about, take that example of being angry about something, even if I do that, I've broken through that little circle that can get tighter and tighter and tighter because I've already gone out and expressed that anger to God, who is other than me. And as soon as I do that, all sorts of things start to happen. For instance, I might start remembering some of Scripture and what I have been taught by the faith about how to be a human being and how to grow as a human being. Whatever I'm angry about, I might think, oh, hang on, Jesus said a lot of things aren't even worth worrying about. They don't add anything to your life, so give it up. Or maybe I need to think about forgiveness or something. There's opportunity while I pray for this to start to impinge upon me. It might lead to confession, which is another form of prayer. And I've spoken extensively this year, and I think this year, maybe last year, about confession, about forgiveness. So prayer can easily lead to that. And remember, confession isn't about saying, oh, I've been so naughty. It's actually about being securely able to understand and explore who we are in the intimate and forgiving presence of God. Another difference is that, as I say, prayer isn't just talking. Because the person who just prays, who just talks, for prayer, and that by that I mean just has a conversation, that's as good as it goes, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem with it is that it becomes stale, and it can get tighter and tighter and fall in on itself. In a similar way to talking to yourself can just go over old ground over and over and over. After a few decades of saying the same thing differently, you start to realise, oh, hang on, that's not getting me very far. Prayer, just as conversation, can end up something like that. Even though it's with God, so therefore you are directed outward straight away, it can have its own sort of limits, become a bit stale. And that's why a traditional church relies on prayer forms of prayer that can lead us on beyond just us talking. Those prayer forms will have within it sections for us to talk and bear what we wish to bear to God. But also it has language and thoughts that lead us on beyond just ourselves and talking to a bigger agenda, and is part of that great living stream of spirituality that the church holds. It gives us a new focus, or a broader focus, and it's a sequential thing. Often a form of prayer is a sequence, so it leads from one thing to the other, so you just don't stay where you are. And that allows you to develop your prayer life and your sense of your presence to God and God's presence to you. I find that when I do this, when I pray, in actual fact, it actually rebounds back into my self-talk. To the atheist from the outside, who thinks that when I'm praying I'm really just talking to myself under a self-delusion, they can see some similarity. I'm doing the talking because I'm an object in the world, so to speak, but God doesn't say anything like I'm talking, or that they would be if I was talking to them the way that they would talk. So they think, he's just talking to himself. So that similarity, though, it's interesting, because when I'm present to myself and to God, I learn a new way of being present to myself that's when I pray, that I don't learn when I talk to myself. When I talk to myself, it generally, it can lead a little bit further on, but it needs more than that. If you want to try and change, for instance, or work on what you're doing, self-talk is good, but you need more than that. Prayer, because it's a mutual presence in the loving presence of God, actually it changes my relationship to myself. I start to see myself differently. I've said this before, I can start to see myself as God sees myself. Now, when I do some self-talk, self-analysis or whatever, or when I start wondering about what's happening in my life, or why did they do this, or something, that new relationship that I am developing to myself in prayer rebounds into my self-talk. It doesn't transform it overnight, but it is actually transferable. This is one of the great gifts of prayer. It can change our own relationship to ourselves, which will change how we talk and see ourselves. That will change us. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.